Welcome to the video for the lesson 3-8 in the math literacy class 050. You should have done the prep skills, obviously talking about slope and graphing lines, which we've done. You also, once you have that slope, you can plug in data that you get and solve that equation. So you want to work on those skills as well. And then read the introduction here. What would it take to plan a party? If you haven't done those things, please do them and then restart the video once you're ready. Otherwise, start the classwork. Read through the introduction and do question 1. Then we will discuss it when you restart the video. Okay, your boss thinks highly enough of your organizational skills to put you in charge of a gala benefit. So you find a banquet hall, you're told that hosting 150 people will cost $6,500. If you up the number to 200, the bill jumps to $8,500. Okay, so we've got a story here, and I've made a big deal about being able to find the slope in the story. Hopefully you notice that you don't really find the slope in this story. Nobody tells you how much it goes up by. If you increase the guests by 1, you increase the bill by a certain amount. We're not told that here. It's a different type of story, but hopefully we can make sense out of it. So, question number 1. If you make the reasonable assumption that the relationship between the number of people and cost is linear, do we have enough information to find a model for the cost? By model, we mean an equation that provides the cost for a certain number of people. Discuss. And, hopefully you thought about some of the things like I just mentioned. We don't have a specific slope, and we don't have a y-intercept. We don't know what the starting price would be. We can tell if it is a proportional relationship because we can take 6,500 and I'm going to have to do the other part on my calculator. So if it's a direct proportion, when we increase, if it's a direct proportion, we should pay the same amount whether we have 150 people or 250 people. We should pay the same amount per person. And I suspect we're not going to. Oops. So 43.33. I better check the 8,500. 8,500 divided by 200. 42.5. So it's cheaper if we have 200 people. So we know we can't just divide the value by, we can't divide the cost by the number of people and get a constant value. So we know that at least, but other than that, we can't just obviously write the equation at this point. Take a look then at question 2. Restart the video when you have answered question 2. Okay. Which quantity should be the independent variable? Which should be the dependent variable? You're going to decide how many people go, and then the cost will depend on how many people are at the banquet. So the cost is dependent. The number of people is independent. Okay. Go on to question 3 and restart the video once you've answered question 3. Okay, so question 3. May not have understood the question, but now that we know that the number of people is independent, that's going to be our x. The number of people that are the cost, then is going to be our y. So when they say write 2 points based on the cost information provided, then use those 2 points to find the slope of a line. They're saying assume we have 2 points, which, well, don't assume that. You can see we have 2 points. You know which number is x, which number is y. Calculate the slope. Okay. If that helps question 3 make more sense, go ahead and try calculating that slope and then come back to the video. Okay, so our slope, y2 minus y1. How much does y change? x2 minus x1. How much does y change when x changes? How much more is y when x is a certain amount more? Okay. So we've got our 2 points. The y is the cost. And I'm going to put the 8,500 first, so I don't have a negative. 6,500 divided by, I need to make sure my 200 comes first now, so that it's with the 8,500, and my 150 is over here. So we didn't have the slope exactly given to us, but we were in fact given 2 points. We can calculate the slope. Okay. So if we increase by 1 person, we increase by 50 people, we go up 2,000. We increase by 1 person, we go up 40. And I'm going to put the units at the end because we know dollars per person. Okay. Answer question 4. Restart the video once you've answered question 4. I kind of gave away the answer to question 4 when I was talking about the slope for question 3. What does the slope tell us about the cost? It tells us how much it costs for one more person, or the cost per person. Okay. Go on to question 5 and restart the video once you've answered question 5. All right. Now that we have a slope, you might have figured, well, maybe we can find the y-intercept. So there's a possibility that we could. So hopefully you thought about a way to find the y-intercept. There are a lot of different ways that people have found the y-intercept for this problem. If you actually read what you're instructed to do in question 5, I'll show you what to do. But a lot of people have actually made a table. Got our 6,500 for 150 people. And we know for every 50 people, we have, it increases $2,000. So if we lose 50 people, we're going to lose $2,000. And if so, 50 people, it's going to cost 2,500. We take away another 2,000. We find that our y-intercept is actually 500, which is a good way to make sense out of this. And you're welcome to do that on the test if it's possible. What the book is actually asking you to do, though, write the generic equation. Y is the cost, and we know that 2,000. I'm sorry, $40 per person times X is going to give us the cost based on the number of people, but then they're going to add a y-intercept. There's a y-intercept, and we knew there'd be a y-intercept because we tried to see if it was direct variation. It's not direct variation, so we knew we had a y-intercept. I'm now going to put a number into that, then substitute in the slope and information from one of the points. So if the cost is 6,500, we have 150 people plus B. And I'm going to actually multiply that out and write it over somewhere else. I'm going to use a different color. So I have 6,500 equals 6,000 plus B. When we solved our equations, we subtract 6,000 from each side. We would have 500 equals B. And that's a good way to find the y-intercept. A lot of times it's hard to do a table because you don't have even numbers like we had here. It helps when you have even numbers. Okay? Restart the video once you've answered question 6. Question 6. What does your y-intercept mean? It's a constant charge. They'll charge $40 per person, but then they also add a constant charge because they have constant costs that are not dependent on the number of people. The banquet hall has to buy more food if you have more people, but it really doesn't cost any more to clean up. It costs the same amount to have somebody come in and clean up after one person as it does to have somebody come in and clean up after 200 people. And the lighting costs, things like that, don't really depend on the number of people. So there are costs that are what we would call fixed cost, and that's really what the y-intercept means. If you said anything about just being a constant value that's added, that's fine. Okay. Answer question 7. Restart the video once you're done. All right, question 7. Write the linear model in the form y equals mx plus b. They're just telling you to take our numbers now. So any cost, we can calculate any cost by doing $40 times x plus 500. And we want to get in the habit. It's not a big problem if you didn't do this, but where x is the number of guests, we do want to get in the habit of explaining our variables, and y is the cost. On question 8, actually, before you go on to question 8, we have just a quick summary. Really read through this, but they're really just saying if you have a story where you're given 2 points, it's not obvious what the slope is, what the y-intercept is, but you have 2 things that are the same. In this story, we had 2 costs, and we had 2 numbers of people. So we knew we were being given 2 points. If you have 2 points, you find the slope. Once you have the slope, use that and one of the points to calculate the y-intercept. Then you rewrite your equation. Y equals, in the case before, y equals 40x plus 500. Then it would be a good idea to plug in the other point and make sure you still get, plug in the other x, make sure you get the other y. So you can use your second point as a check, which I didn't do, but that's a good idea in general. Okay. Now go on to question 8. All right. Question 8. Graph the line you found and then the 2 points you were originally given. If the line doesn't go through the points, what does that mean? Okay. Well, hopefully we got it right. But a lot of times people go through questions 1 through 8 before they check their answers. Obviously, if you don't get if your line doesn't go through the points, then you made a mistake somewhere. Hopefully I didn't make a mistake. So we'll start with our line, and it's hard to go over 1 and up 40. When you have your slope, every time we increase x by 1, we increase y by 40. So I'm going to just say every time we increase x by 100, we increase y by 4,000. That's going to give me a line. And so at 150, we need to go through the point 6,500. And it came pretty close. At 200, we need to go through 8,500. That was a little closer there. So if I had drawn my line better, I would have gone right through those 2 points. Okay. Go on to question 9. Restart the video once you're done. Question 9. We know that the slope of the line connecting any 2 points on the line is, generalize. Slope of the line connecting any 2 points on the line is, may have had trouble with this one, constant. If you have a straight line, the slope between any 2 points is constant. It doesn't matter which 2 points you pick. Restart the video once you've done question 10. Call one point on the graph x and y. Find the slope between that generic point and the point 150, 6,500. This is kind of interesting. We're getting to what we're, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to say my x2, so m is my slope, y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. I'm going to say x2 can be any point. x2, y2 can be any point. And to do that, I'm going to say y is my y2. X is so x and y are my second point. I'm going to make my first point 6,500, and my x1 is going to be then 150 people. So I've written an equation for my slope in general terms. I can plug in any x and y and get my slope. And as we know before, that's going to be equal to $40 per person. Multiply both sides of the denominator to clear the fractions. Go ahead and do that. Restart the video once you're done. Okay. X minus 150. As you know, when we multiply both sides of an equation by the same thing, we do not change the fact that they're equal. We change both sides, but we change them in the same way. So y minus 6,500 equals 40 times x minus 150. Okay. And you'll notice that there's some discussion there. What you have now is called the point slope form of the line. So this is now an equation. We have x on one side, we have y on the other side. We can plug in an x, take x minus 150, multiply it by 40, add 6,500, we end up with y. So it's an equation where we can calculate y once we know x. It's just in a different form than we're used to. If you get to feeling comfortable with it, though, you can actually use this form when you have a story like the party story, where you're given 2 points. You can calculate the slope and then put it into this form. You don't have to worry about finding the y-intercept. Okay? So anyway, that's kind of the idea behind the point slope form. Okay? Go on to question 12. Restart the video once you have finished question 12. Okay, and I should have mentioned you could have used the point 8,500 and 200 instead of 6,500 and 150. If you did it that way, that's fine. You didn't have to do it this way. Should have mentioned that before. But now they want us to solve for y and simplify the problem. Get the problem in simplest form. So in simplest form, we get rid of the parentheses. To do that, I multiply 40 times x. But then I also have to multiply 40 times 150. You should be recognizing some numbers at this point. Solve now for y. And we end up with same thing that we got before when we plug into our, well, before we took y equals 40x plus b. We plugged in our point. And we solved for b. We got the 500. Then we wrote our equation. We wrote the same equation. Okay? So the whole point of this question was really to get you to see that the two forms of the equation demonstrate the same relationship. We say they are the same equation. They look different, but if you plug x into either equation, you'll get the same y because they're really the same equation. And then we have this little summary. Instead of calling it y and y1, x and x1, we call it y and y0, x and x0, where x0 and y0 are one of the points that you're given. Example, a line through the point 2, 7 with a slope of -3 has the equation y minus 7 equals -3 times x minus 2. So if we're given a point, we're given the slope. And there are a lot of stories where we have a slope and we're given a point. It's easy to just plug those numbers into the point slope form. If you want to use the y equals mx plus b form, you have to calculate the b, which you can do the way we did before. So that's a fine way to do it. If you don't want to remember this form, y minus y0 equals m times x minus x0. I should say m times the quantity x minus x0 to indicate that x minus x0 is in parentheses. You can do it either way. Looks like we have a did you get it now? They give you a point, they give you a slope. They want you to write and write equations in the point slope form. If you don't get it and don't understand why, please let me know. Once you have done question 1 in the group work, restart the video and we will discuss it. Okay. Small business has been selling 200 digital locking cookie jars per week, which has led to them losing $150 each week. Net profit of $150. According to their business plan, their net profit will increase $12 for each unit sold. So if we can sell one more unit, our profit will increase by 12. Okay. What evidence do you see that would lead you to conclude that this is a linear relationship between net profit and units sold? That the fact that they're telling us every unit sold increases the cost by the same $12. They're telling us that the increase in profit for selling one more cookie jar is constant, tells us that it's linear. Okay, restart the video once you've answered question 2. Question 2, the independent variable. In this case, the independent variable is the number of cookie jars, because profit depends on the number of cookie jars sold. So this is the cookie jars. And profit depends on the number of cookie jars. Go on to question 3. Restart the video when you're done. Okay. What's the slope? How do you know that? We know that the $12 per cookie jar is the slope, and we know that because it says for each unit sold. Each is how we know that. Write the equation in the slope-intercept form. Restart the video once you've done that. Okay. So 2 ways to do this. You can say we have our slope, and I'm going to pick a point. We have our point. Can't pick a point. There's only one. So 200 cookie jars are X. Profit is Y, because profit is the dependent. Sorry. So $12 times 200 cookie jars. That's a 0. 200 cookie jars plus my y-intercept, which I represent with B. Some people say the B represents the beginning. It's where you start out when X is 0. That helps you remember the B. That's fine. Okay. We can do that and solve for B, or we can use our point slope form. So Y minus negative 150. It's important that we do that. Equals 12 times X minus 200. So if we use our point slope form, we have to change it to the slope intercept form. So we multiply our 12x, or we distribute our 12. So 12 times x is 12x, minus 12 times 200 is 2,400. Subtracting a negative is like adding a positive. Okay. Over here, 12 times 200, that's our 2,400 plus b. We subtract 2,400 from both sides to get our y-intercept. So we know that b equals negative 2,550. Over here, we subtract 150 from both sides because we had our positive. We get y equals 12x minus 2,550. So that's actually in the slope-intercept form. Here on the left, I have to write the slope-intercept form, but now I know y equals, given a slope of 12x plus, or not plus, I could say plus and negative. I'm just going to say minus 2,550 because we have found that the y-intercept is negative 2,550. So either way, we end up with the same equation. When you're asked to do this, you can do it either way you want, whatever feels best for you. Okay? Question 5. Answer question 5 and then restart the video. So question 5, what is the y-intercept? Well, that's obviously negative 2,550. It's actually in dollars. You notice the 12 was in dollars. dollars per cookie jar. We multiply that by 200 cookie jars. We just get $12. Then we subtract the $150 that we're losing. So this is the y-intercept. What does it mean? It means that when we calculate the profit, we take the cookie jars times 12, because our profit increases by 12 for every cookie jar. We actually have fixed costs. Whether we sell a cookie jar or not, we have costs associated just with owning the property where we make the cookie jars. Owning the factory has costs. Even if we shut the factory down, we still have to pay those costs. And that's what this actually represents. On to question 6. And to restart the video, once you have answered question 6. Question 6, how many cookie jars do they need to sell in order to break even? Break even means, and if I had written the equation in terms of P and C for cookie jars, I would actually say P equals 0. So I can plug in 0 for Y. When it says break even means profit is 0. In this case, Y equals 0. And in this case, we have plugged something into our linear equation now. We are now using our solving skills. This becomes a case where we are solving an equation. So we are finding x when we know that y is 0. So to get x by itself, we first of all start by adding 2,550 to both sides. And so now we know how much money we have to make to break even. We're going to divide that by the amount of money we get for each cookie jar. So we divide by 12. And we get 212.5, I believe. Which means we would have to sell approximately 213. Let's check it. Yeah. So 213 cookie jars in order to break even. Go on to question 7 and restart the video once you're done. Okay, question 7. So 200 cookie jars, 0, negative 2, 5, 5, 0. If we sell 0 cookie jars, that's our y-intercept. So we've got that. We sell 200, we're told that they lose $150 in profit. The other ones we actually have to calculate. And I'm going to do it really quickly. 400 times 12 minus 2,550, 2,250. You'll notice that's positive because it's more than 213. 600 times 12 minus 2,550, 4,650. And fill in the table of values, and then use it to draw a graph of your equation. So I've got my x out here, I've got my y up here, and the easiest way I think to do this is for each one of these to be, each one of the big lines to be 5,000, which means each one of the small lines is going to be 1,000, because there are 5 lines in between 0 and 5,000. And my cookie jars will go by, looks like they need to go by 200. So 0 cookie jars, negative 2,550. So it's going to be between negative 2,000 and negative 3,000, pretty close to the middle. I go to 200, I'm at negative 150, which is just barely below 0. In fact, my dot's actually going to be a little bit over the 0. I go to 400, then I go to 2,250, which is between the 2,000 and the 3,000 line. A little bit closer to the 2,000 line, not halfway in the middle. And then when I go to 600, I am at 4,650, which is closer to 5,000 than it is to 4,000. Okay. So I've got my graph. Find the number of units needed to make a profit of at least 500 per week. Restart the video once you've done that. Okay. Similar to what we did before with the break even, we're given profit again, but now we want profit to be 500 equals 12x minus 2,550. And I will add 2,550 to both sides. $3,050. Okay. Then I can divide both sides by 12. And I will end up with x equals $254.1. And I'm just going to say 254. Actually, I'm going to go to 2,555. I'm sorry, 255, because it does say at least $500 profit per week. When it says that, I do need to round up, even though I would typically round that down. To answer this question, I really need to make sure that I have more than $500. Go on to question 9 and restart the video once you've done question 9. Custom shirt shop charges a setup fee plus an additional fixed amount per shirt. An order of 20 shirts costs $180, and an order of 25 shirts costs $228. So we're seeing number of shirts, cost. So we know there's a relationship between the number of shirts and the cost, and we are then given 2 points that define that relationship. And I'm afraid I just answered question 9 for you. So what evidence do you see that would lead you to conclude that this is a linear relationship between the number of shirts ordered and the total cost of the order? They actually tell us a fixed amount. Okay, what evidence do you see would lead you to conclude that this is a linear relationship between the number of shirts and the total cost? They just say a fixed amount per shirt. Okay, so do question 10, then restart the video. Identify the independent and dependent variables. So you're going to make the choice on how many shirts to order. The cost is going to depend on that. So number of shirts is independent and the cost is dependent. I should mention you're supposed to be writing these out as complete sentences. I just don't want you to sit there while I write this as a complete sentence. And anyway, try question 11. And you should be able to do question 11 if you did the Did You Get It? But restart the video once you're done. Okay, so for the slope. As we've seen before, since we've decided number of shirts is independent, that's going to be our x. That makes cost our y, the dependent. So I'll start out with the higher cost. So I don't have a negative, minus 188 divided by, and 25 shirts cost $280. So $228. So 228 comes first. My 25 has to come first. And so the 20 then goes with my 188. And I have 40. Yeah. 40 divided by 5, which equals $8 per shirt. And if it's not clear, you remember the dollars were in the Y was dollars and the X was shirts. I just haven't been writing those units in the calculation. If it helps you to do that, go right ahead and do that. What does it mean? It means for every shirt you pay $8. All right, question 12. Restart the video once you've done that. Find an equation that will allow you to calculate the cost of ordering any number of shirts. Well, we've got 2 points. We've got our slope. We could use the point slope form. I'll go ahead and do it both ways. Really doesn't matter how you do it. We have our slope, y equals mx plus b is our standard form. What we can do at this point is plug in a y and our slope. Okay. Or we can go to our point slope form. We can say y minus, and I'm going to use the same y that I used on the left-hand side. Remember, I'm doing 2 different things here. You only have to do one of them. 8 times that. I am going to, just like I did with the y equals mx plus b, I'm going to write the standard form, just so you see that. Y minus y0 equals m times x minus x0. If it helps you to write those initially, you're welcome to go ahead and do that. If you don't want to, you don't have to. Then I'm going to plug in minus y0 I'm going to use the same point that I used in the y equals mx plus b form. Minus 20. On the left-hand side, I've got enough information now to calculate my y-intercept. 160 plus the y-intercept equals 188. Well, I know if I'm going to add b to 160 and get 188, I can find out what b is by subtracting 160 from 188. When I do that, I get 20. And that would that's not equal to 160 plus b, but if I take that 160 away, that's equal to b. 20 is equal to b. I'm sorry. As you can see, people make mistakes sometimes when they're doing math problems. 28 is equal to b. If I go back over to the left-hand side, the first thing I'm going to do is distribute the 8 into the parentheses. So I will have 8x minus 8 times 20 is 160. And that is still equal to y minus 188. Okay. On the left-hand side, having figured out my b, I can now go back. I know my b, I know my y-intercept, I know my slope m equals 8x plus 28. On the right-hand side now, if I actually have an equation for y in, that I can use to calculate y if I know x, but I don't have what we call y in terms of x. To get y in terms of x, I want just to say y equals. Then I do these calculations, and the answer is y. I don't have that on the right-hand side right now, but if I use my equation solving tools, I add 188 to both sides. I end up with y equals 8x plus 28. Okay. There again, either way you feel more comfortable doing this, you're welcome to do it that way. If you want to do a table, you could actually do a table and find the y-intercept like I did before. That works too. Okay. First of all, though, what is the y-intercept? What does it mean? Answer that question and then restart the video. For question 13, I think I probably already told you the y-intercept is 28. And what does it mean, though? It's actually $28. If I look at what I did, my $8 per So I have $8 per shirt times 20 shirt. That gives me dollars. And 188 was dollars. So $188 minus $160. The 28 is actually dollars. And it's the dollars that they charge as their setup fee. No matter how many shirts you order, they charge you an additional $28 for setting up the equipment. Go on to question 14 and restart the video once you've done question 14. Graph your equation. Question 14 is kind of a pain, but let's go ahead. We'll start with 0. I'll put the x on the horizontal as we normally do. I'll put the y on the vertical. And if you use different variables, that's fine. I could use p and s. That would make more sense. The don't worry if you did something like that. That's perfectly all right. As long as you identify them, you're fine. And so I've got 20 and 25. It looks like if I go 5, 10, 15 for my dark lines, 20, 25. And I know at 25, I'm at 228. So if I go by 50, I have 50, 100, 150, 200. The top of the graph then would be 250. So I should actually be okay trying to graph this. So halfway between 0 and 50 is 25. My y-intercept is 28. So I'm going to put a line just above 25 for my y-intercept. And I'll go ahead and graph 20 shirts. That's not 106. We'll figure that out. 120 shirts. I have 188. So 150, 160, 170. So actually, we're going by 4. So 150, halfway between 150 and 200 be 175. A little bit more than 175 is going to be my 188. At 25, we sold 228, and that's a little bit more than 225. Okay. So I've got my graph there. And if you want to think about it in terms of the slope and the y-intercept, I've got my y-intercept. If I go up 1, if I sell 1 more shirt, I pay $8 more. If I sell 10 more shirts, I pay $80 more. So if I start at 28, I go over 10, I add 8, I'm up at 108. So my line went a little bit low. So go over 10, go up 80. 80 plus 28 is 108. If I go over another 10, I'm going to go up another 80. 108 plus 80 is 188. Okay. Different ways of thinking about how to do a graph once you know the slope and the y-intercept. So anyway, go on to question 15. Restart the video when you're done with question 15. Question 15. I'm just rewriting the equation that we got. So we know that we can calculate the cost by taking the number of shirts times 8 plus 28. And I'm getting kind of lazy. I'm not going to do that in my head. 8 times 35 plus 28, 308. I'm going to say dollars because it's the cost. Okay. Question 16. You'll notice that's a little bit different. But you should be getting used to that difference by now. Restart the video once you've answered question 16. Question 16, we're using that same formula. You don't have to write it every time. I just do that for your benefit. You want to spend at most $500. Okay? And at most $500, so I'm going to put my $500 in here. And you'll notice earlier I was really careful about which way to go because we actually had, when we were calculating the break-even point and calculating the cost of the 500. Profit of $500 with the cookie jars. Um, I was really careful about which way I would go because I wanted to be in line with the question where it says at most or at least, or what's the least amount. I'm actually going to write this as an inequality because that's something you're going to need to do on your test. So we want the actual value is going to be 8x plus 28. And we want the actual value to be less than $500. Or we want $500 to be greater than, and actually when it says at most, it could be greater than or equal to the actual value. So $500 is greater than or equal to the actual cost, which is 8x plus 28. If you did this using an equation, that's fine. But think about how you answer it. Think about how you round it when you answer it. You want to make sure that your x value gives you a cost that is not greater than 500, either 500 or less than 500. But it's also good to think about the inequalities. Like I say, you will need to do that on your test. So I've got an equation now. And thinking about it, I know I have to pay that $28, so we'll just subtract the $28 from the 500 to figure out how much we're going to be able to spend on shirts. And in math, I'm showing that I'm subtracting it from the 500, which gives me $472. And I'm not multiplying or dividing by a negative, so it's still greater than 8x. And since I took it away, it made sense to subtract the 28 from the 500. But if I do it to the left side, I have to do it to the right side. I end up with 8x is less than or equal to 472. Now I know I can spend 472 on the shirts. I'm going to divide 472 by the cost per shirt to get the number of shirts. And again, in math class, if we divide the 472 by 8, we know that's going to be equal to x. I'm sorry, in this case, it needs to be greater than or equal to x. So I can get that x by taking 8x divided by by 8. We just like to show that. That's all we're doing on the left-hand side. The right-hand side makes sense. The left-hand side makes sense mathematically. So once again, I'm just going to go to the calculator. Nothing wrong with that. We can get 59 shirts. Okay. And so x has to be less than or equal to 59. Since we did not have a decimal, I don't really need to worry about how to round it. But anyway, you got to see another inequality and solving an inequality. Like I said, if you did it just using an equation, that's fine. If you get a decimal, you need to think about which way to round, because it's different than just rounding up if it's more than 0.5, rounding down if it's less than 0.5. When you have an inequality, you have to make sure you meet that inequality, and you either go up or down based on that, not the actual value of the decimal. Got it? Did you get it? If you don't get it, let me know. We can discuss it. And with that, we're actually at the end of the lesson. Remember, we don't do the technology. We do the online practice. That's the ALEKS. And you do need to submit the applications. Okay. I will have a place on D2L for you to submit those applications. And once you're done with the applications, make sure you do the looking ahead. Read ahead to the the beginning of the next lesson, which is not lesson 3-9. We do not do 3-9. After this, we have 2 more lessons, 4-2 and 4-8. So you will get ready for lesson 4-2. After that, we have our third test, and then after that, we have a day of review, which, since we're not in class, I'll just have a WebEx session where people can ask questions. But other than that, you'll be doing the reviews on your own, just like you did when we were in class, but then asking questions during the WebEx session. Then after that review, we have our final over the entire class. So, at any rate, we will do that when we get to it. Thank you for watching, and good luck with the applications.